In a world of unpredictable markets and constant economic shifts, one question remains. How do you build wealth that works while you sleep? Welcome to What Pros Do, the podcast where we sit down with top real estate investors and financial freedom seekers to uncover the strategies, tools, and mindsets that turn uncertainty into opportunity. This isn't theory. This is what pros do. Let's build a life on cash flow, freedom, and future-proof wealth.
Hey guys, my name is Ray. Welcome to What Pros Do. So we have here Zander and Jean. I've met these beautiful people here at the STR Society in Seattle. My buddy Chris Price runs it, and we always get to meet amazing people here. So Zander and Jean, I'd love you guys to, introduce yourselves. I know you guys just started your Airbnb journey, and I think a lot of people would love to hear your insight on how that went, okay? So I guess let's get started with you, Jean. How was your first Airbnb? Did it go exactly the way you planned?
It did not go exactly the way that we planned. So for our first Airbnb, we decided to do a flip and then turn it into an Airbnb. So we bought a house that needed to be cosmetically updated. So new floors, countertops, paint, add a couple amenities. And so that process took about 4 months.
Yeah.
And so for those 4 months, you always run into different things with contractors and timelines, and getting through that process was very humbling, I would say, for the two of us, but definitely rewarding in the end.
Gotcha. So, definitely starting an Airbnb is already difficult, right? To have to do a flip on top of that, I can already resonate with that story, right? Me doing my out-of-state investment in Michigan, I had to do a renovation, and I can only imagine. And I want to definitely dig into that. But I think a lot of people, who are wanting to get into the Airbnb space, would you recommend doing a full gut renovation when they're starting out on their first Airbnb?
I wouldn't change anything that we did. And so I'm really happy that we did it. Because it taught us a lot, and we were specifically looking near the North Cascades, and there really just wasn't any properties that had come on over the past year that were ready to, go right away.
Yep.
And so I feel like for where we were at and where we were ready to invest, and, it made all the sense in the world. I think that we had more flexible jobs, which allowed us to be up there for a lot of the renovation. We live about 2 hours away, so that allowed us to go up there. For your first one, I would absolutely not recommend doing a flip if you're out of state.
Okay.
I think that that's definitely something I would recommend, staying close to home if you're going to renovate. But I think there's also so many benefits of renovating, right? You're immediately increasing the equity of the home, you're increasing the value, and so that's where it's a really smart way to be able to leverage funds later down the line.
Gotcha. And then for you guys' deal, I'm not sure how you guys acquired it. Like, was this conventional financing? Did you find this an off-market deal? How'd you guys find the deal?
Yeah, we actually used the BiggerPockets resource to find a realtor. We told him exactly what we were looking for, and we did it all conventional.
Oh, wow.
Which I think definitely has its benefits. It has its drawbacks. But for us, we knew we had a property that was ready to be sold, and we were able to jump on it with a great team, and I think it was definitely necessary for us to have an experienced realtor who knew the market, knew the other side of the table making the deal, and that just made things closing the deal go smooth, which that could have been drug out for who knows how long.
Yes. And as you know, us being investors, right, everybody has different ways to kind of finance their deals, right? I know for me, a lot of my financing was using some of my prior real estate through a HELOC, or just saving my pennies with my business, So just out of curiosity, how did you guys come up with your renovation budget and also get the down payment to close on this property?
Yeah, this was all tapping into the good old savings. So
Wow.
selling off some investments that were, positive, and it was just time to put that money to work elsewhere. So nothing crazy. It was just good old hard work from the W-2, reinvesting that money into another pathway and another vehicle.
That's awesome. And, I just want to tell people, like, this is exactly what a lot of us do, right? Everybody always expects most investors have, some rich dad somewhere who just gave them all this money. And I want people to know that, like, it's really hardworking individuals who are getting their property essentially one rental at a time, right? Other questions that I have for you guys is, there's always things that you think are going to go as planned and they don't quite go as planned, right?
Yes.
And what are those things for both of you guys? What was that?
I think for me, the renovation went over budget and over timeline. And everyone always jokes, just be aware it's not going to be on time and it's not going to be on budget. And that is so true. So it's kind of comical when that came out. But then ultimately launching an Airbnb, you look at all the modeling, you look at the numbers, and you're like, great, the bookings are just going to roll in day one as soon as it goes live. And it takes a little bit of time to start gaining that momentum, to get those positive reviews, to get traction on that algorithm, to actually pick up and get these higher revenue bookings. So I think those first couple months we launched it, I was a little disappointed, a little disheartened. It led to a couple fetal position moments where I was like, what are we doing? Why did we do this? But just being patient with the process, putting in the hard work, even on the back end with the listing, and working with experts in the field, we were able to get it up to where we expected it to be. And so it wasn't a total surprise, but I just think it's never as easy as it can be painted from others on the internet.
It's definitely not a get-rich-quick venture by any means. And, kind of going back to your original question on some, like, delays in the project, like, one that really sticks out to me is we were installing new flooring, and we had a washer and dryer get delivered, paid for it to be installed, and it wasn't installed properly. Ran that first load, the entire laundry room flooded. So that new flooring we had just put in that room had to be torn up, repurchased, and reinstalled. Something else that comes to mind is we were anticipating saving the trim on the house. So they pulled the trim off, took the flooring, the previous flooring off to put in the new flooring to use the old trim. It wasn't sitting right, it wasn't looking right, so we're adding weeks and more material on top. So little things like that come up, and I think it's really important to have wiggle room in your budget and to be comfortable. I know we went in knowing that we had a budget for around $40,000 for our entire budget, and we definitely came in closer to probably 60. And so knowing that, that others have always said budget for more, we anticipated that, and so we were okay. But I think, like, something I would definitely advise people is make sure that you have some wiggle room and know things are going to come up, timeline's going to extend. It's okay, it's just part of it.
Yes, I would have to agree with you on that. Even on my property in Michigan, I had a budget in mind. I blew through that budget, blew through the timeline, right? And I think that's what people have to be ready for. And if you're not, and you don't put that emergency fund to the side, you're going to put yourself in a situation. So I think one thing that people should definitely take note is, if you are going to tackle on an Airbnb project, just expect that timeline to maybe be double or maybe 30% more than what you probably initially expected, right? I think this is so awesome that you guys are really sharing and being vulnerable, right? Because I think a lot of people who share their journey, it always seems like it's rainbows and sunshines, right? And I just don't feel that's the reality in real estate investing. And I also feel like the Airbnb space, I feel a lot of long-term investors who are in long-term rentals, they feel the Airbnb space is so hard to get into. And I'm not quite sure why, right? I understand you have to furnish it. You might have to, remove the tenants that you have there, and that makes it a little bit difficult. But if you guys were talking to somebody who just owns long-term rentals, like, what would you say to them to kind of like maybe open those doors and see what Airbnb is like? What would be your suggestion? You know what I'm saying?
So we actually own 2 long-term rentals in Kansas City, and it's where we started with real estate. And so it's a lower barrier to entry in Kansas City, right? It's cheaper to get in. much more stable, but the profit's lower. So there is a little bit more risk with Airbnb, but there is a higher reward. And there's also significant tax benefits to take advantage of with Airbnbs. So, what do you think really got us there to take the long term into the short term?
I think it was the idea of we knew what the stable route was. We knew there was money to be made in long-term rentals when you plan and execute appropriately. But having just those extra benefits, and also that comes with the uncertainty of Airbnb. Like, you're not locked into a year-long lease, 2-year-long lease.
Yes.
You're trading that risk for more reward. And being younger, I think it was the right opportunity for us to jump on. If an Airbnb fails, great. I can figure it out. We can turn it. We had an exit strategy, whether that was turning it into, a midterm or a long-term rental, or just enjoying it for personal use and accepting that it's a loss.
Yes.
We had multiple strategies available if the Airbnb route did not turn out to be profitable.
Yes. And I want to add to that, like you said, some of the benefits that we get to do is with the short-term rental, you're not locked into the short-term rental, right? And also the benefits that you and your family could use the space, right? That's one of the things that we want to do is we want to travel and use our space to be a place to vacation and enjoy, right? And I feel like when you have a long-term rental, you really can't do those kind of things with that property, right? Another thing I really want to kind of just add to this, right? I think, one, I really appreciate you guys' time and just being so open with your investment. The other thing that I always think is super important is a community, right? I think what Chris is doing here with the STR community is absolutely fantastic. We're on a rooftop right now in Seattle. It's pretty bougie out here, guys. And we get to meet amazing people like you guys. What do you guys feel about surrounding yourself with investors who are like-minded? How important is that in your journey?
It's a game changer. I think more and more there's tons of information out there about you really are a combination of the closest people you surround yourself with. And if you're not spending time having these conversations that you're passionate about, trying to grow, trying to learn, you're probably not with the right people. And for where I want to go and where we want to go, it's all about who can we learn from, who can we, crowdsource just ideas with, like who can we learn the fastest from, who's had these experiences before, and who can we call that has a recommendation on what to do when the kitchen sink is backed up or the toilet's backed up. I think it's so powerful to have different lifelines and different resources. And I think the abundance mindset is so real that Chris really has driven home in me is there's no way you can't win as a community, or you can win as a community. That's what it's all about.
Yes. And I want to add to that. When you guys were doing your Airbnb, I was also doing my Airbnb. And I think we were kind of sharing our thoughts and ideas and the struggles. And it was just nice to kind of hear that somebody else was going through the same things that I was going through, And I think that's why it's so important to surround yourself with individuals who think like you, right? So anyways, guys, I appreciate your time. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of What Pros Do with Jean and Zander. And thank you again for being on the show, guys.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.